Hey everyone, I wanted to share a message with you. I just feel from God that this is something that needs to be shared. Now, I've touched on it in past videos, but I really want to get more in depth. I really want to try and expose possibly the enemy's agenda regarding man making money and more or less his distraction that he uses to take us from God and putting our focus on this world. And so I have encountered this in like so many believers in conversations or even on these dating sites that I had seen, especially a Christian one. I mean, the world, that's a given. The world's going to function in that way to where, they're going to work, make money, be financially successful and stuff like that. That's a given. But when it comes to Christians, even Christians have that mentality that it's all about making money and stuff like that. And it's not even given a second thought because we're born in this world. We're taught that we have to do all these things and we go to church on Sunday, but you know, where is the depth regarding relationship with God? Where is the depth in finding out, God, what do you want me to do? Am I just born in this world? And it reminds me of that movie, Jesus of Nazareth, where when Jesus first met John, John was talking about him that, Jesus's words lifted him from within himself and that, he brought alive the 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 old commandments. And he said there must be more than being born and dying in this world. And Jesus gave him that hope. And there's more to each of us that God has given. He's given us each a will, but that will is hidden until we actually seek God, until we actually find out from God, God, what do you want me to do? So I really want to, in this video, try to show believers the distraction that they're possibly under. I mean, I'll get into it eventually, but I'm going to try to give like questions that there's a possibility that you're being distracted from God and what he wants of you. And I'll get into that. So I'm going to start this off by saying that, of course, there are two ways to think in this world. There is the world's way, and then there's God's way. We know that. The flesh focuses on this world. The flesh is all about what we want to do, what our aspirations are, what our desires are each and every day. Well, the spirit is to focus on God, what God wants, what our aspirations are for God, what he wants us to do. So you could see the difference. We know in the flesh and the spirit. Flesh, there's hate, there's unforgiveness and stuff like that. But with the spirit, there is love. We know that. But when we dive deeper into the flesh and the spirit, we can find out even more if we're willing to see. What else are we doing in our lives that is not following the spirit, but it's following the flesh? So my question is, do you want to serve as a believer? Who do you want to serve as a believer? And of course, a lot of people are going to say God. Okay. Question 2, what is your goal in 2 years personally? Now, it's probably already coming to mind. Now, if your response is following God and what he wants, then your focus is on God. Remember, Jesus focused solely on God. He said at the Garden of Gethsemane, not my will, but yours be done. He could have easily said, no, Father, I don't want to die. I want to live. Well, that would have just destroyed our salvation if he would have went with that, but he didn't. He said, not my will, but yours be done. Now, if your thought honestly was about, in 2 years, I want to get a house. In 2 years, I want to make a lot of money. I want to have this much money. I want to have this, perfect job and stuff like that. Well, you could see the difference between God and what this world wants. Now, I recall going on different dating sites, and the girls say, well, on this Christian site, girls say God is number one, but they want their potential partner to be hardworking and financially successful. Now, what are they doing for God is my question. Now, Jesus spoke about in Matthew 7, not everyone who calls out to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. Only those, and I underline this, only those who actually do the will of my Father in heaven will enter. On Judgment Day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons, and in your name perform many miracles? All Christian related things. But there's a problem. But I can't even read my writing, but I will say, I never knew you. Get away from me, you who break God's laws. So, I mean, there is a heart situation going on here. They didn't know God, but they did God related things. Well, even if it's God related things, what about worldly related things? What are believers doing when their focus is totally on finances and not on God? And when you're pushing your spouse to be financially successful, is it possible that you're being used by the enemy to distract them from what's really important in their life? Distracting them instead of pushing them to God, what God wants of them personally, what God wants of you personally, what God wants of you together corporately as a whole, doing what God wants. Now, Jesus said, I never knew you. Get away from me, you who break God's laws. Well, how do we get to know somebody? We know them by spending time with them. Now, if your focus is on making money, how much time do you spend personally with God? Have you asked him, Lord, what do you want me to do? Another question, is it possible the enemy is distracting you to what really is important? Now, Jesus dealt with that possible distraction. What was the enemy trying to distract Jesus from when he was tempting him? Well, not to do God's will, not to die for us. Because then if he didn't die for us, then Satan would continue to have us in his grasp. But it wasn't what Jesus wanted. Remember, Satan tried to offer Jesus all the kingdoms of the world in their splendor, but he didn't take the bait. Jesus' desire was to follow God's will. Now, is it possible that the enemy has distracted you, has tempted you away from what God wants in your life personally? Now, for me personally, I used to, I grew up and I was always told that I had to get a good paying job. I had to have money saved up. I had to work to get a house because I can't marry unless I had all those in place. So that put me on the path of desiring to make money, desiring to have these things. And when those things are foremost in my mind, God never resided there. I never thought once about God because my focus was totally on making money and doing what this world said I had to do. But this all changed when I got to that place to where I gave it up to God. I said, Lord, I can't do this because I was fired from an insurance job and I couldn't understand it because of my personal limitations. So I said to God, because previously I thought, God wanted me to, follow in line like everybody else in the world, making money. I thought that was what God wanted until I surrendered my will to Him. And He told me differently. And, that surrendering is according to Romans 12, 1 and 2. So here are some questions, and I'll reiterate them in a few moments as well. Questions you can ask yourself. Do you hear from God daily? Have you taken up your cross, denied yourself and what you want to do in this world, and follow Jesus? Now, we know that the enemy is cunning. We know that he tempts. We know that he steals, he kills, and he destroys, and he's manipulative. We know that we're going through hardship. He speaks negatively, making us feel worse. When we in a disagreement with somebody, he tells us to hate them. So if your focus is off of God, you can fall prey to the enemy's schemes. The enemy's going to push you to follow in line with this world. And the enemy uses mammon. Remember, Jesus said that you cannot serve God and mammon. Read that entire verse personally. If you want to pause this video, read that verse, find it and read it, and then read it again, and then come back to what I'm saying. Because there is a clash. There is the world of mammon. That is what the world follows. Mammon teaches the financially elite to be successful. The elite teach regular people to be financially successful, to put people on this path to do so. That's the enemy's scheme, to take you off of God and onto what this world says that you have to do. So the enemy is cunning. He can use mammon to dissuade you from God, because God knows what you're going to do for him. He has a plan. He has a will for each and every single one of you. But the enemy wants to take you away from God and put your focus on this world, because then you can't be detrimental to him and his plans. Now, I'm going to reiterate what I had just said. This is the test to see if you're distracted from God. Number one, do you hear God daily? Now, if you hear God daily, God's going to tell you, if you're open to hearing him, what he wants you to do. Number two, do you know his will for your life? Now, you can't assume without hearing from God and surrendering to him that you know what his will is. Like I said before, I was born in this world and I followed what the world said, and I thought it was God approved with me following in line with everybody else, until I surrendered to him and he told me that I was poisoned by this world in my mind. I was distracted from him. And that's the whole reason of this message. This is what God pointed me to in this teaching, with the whole distractions and what I'm going to eventually get into. So, like I said, you can't assume that you're doing God's will by possibly making money and being financially successful if you've never heard him. If you've never heard him say, I want you to do this, you can't assume you're doing what God wants you to do. Now, there's a difference between surrendering your will and surrendering your life. I hear that all the time. I've seen these on the dating sites with a lot of these Christian girls saying, I gave my life to God. God is number one. But they're still following in line with the world says. They're still trying to find their man to push him to be on the path that Mammon wants man to follow. They're not serving God, they're serving Mammon. So Christians say that they surrendered their lives to God. Well, if you really surrendered your life to God, you would know what God wants of you to do. So that's why there's a difference, I believe, between surrendering your life. You can give your life to Jesus. That's great, because there's people that do, and they go to church and stuff like that, and there's fruit. Yeah, that's true. But there's a stopping point. What if God told them, I want you to quit your job and trust me? Would they do it? If they won't do that, it proves that Mammon has a hold on them in their lives. What if God said to them, I want you to get all the money that's in your bank account and give it to this person I'm going to tell you? Would they do it? If they won't do it, that proves right there that they have not surrendered their will to God. And there's a difference between surrendering your life, like I said, and surrendering your will. And surrendering my will, I was like, God, you take the driver's wheel. I'm not doing it anymore. You tell me what you want me to do, and I want to do it. That was the difference. Now, it says in Romans 12:1 and 2, and I don't know how long I have before the video is going to cut off. I might have to make a part 2, which is most likely a certainty. But getting into Romans 12:1 and 2, Paul said, therefore, in view of God's mercy, offering your bodies as a living sacrifice to the Lord, which is holy and pleasing and acceptable to him. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you can test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. You might have to read that over again, Romans 12:1 and 2. And then further, 1 John 2:15 to 17, do not love the world or anything of the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. And then you can read verse 17. I don't really remember what that says without looking at it, and I can't look at it on my phone when I'm recording. But that's the rest of that verse, where it's all about not loving the world. And verse 17 is very important. You want to check that out. Now, I want to show you what God had pointed to me in Matthew chapter 13. And this opened my eyes. This is exactly man's dilemma and what he's going through in this world. This is what he goes through on a daily basis. So, getting into Matthew 13, verse 7, Jesus touched on it, then he got into it more deeper. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Now, you can see that there is a process of natural growth with the seed, that it grew into a plant, but that plant was eventually choked by the thorns. In verse 22, the one who received the seed that fell among thorns is the man who hears the word, but the worries of this life and the deceitfulness of wealth choke it, making it unfruitful. This is man's dilemma. This is what the believer's dilemma is every day. Now, let's take the Greek words. Now, I'm going to read the verse again. The one who received the seed that fell among the thorns is the man who hears the word, but the worries of this life, and the deceitfulness. Now, worries is like cares. Cares is the Greek word merimna, which is a distraction, which means a care for something or someone. Well, how do we see that? We see that every day. Man cares about his job. Man cares about making money. Man cares about being financially successful. The cares of this world and the deceitfulness. Deceitfulness, the Greek word means delusion. The delusion of wealth. Man has a desire what he wants. He wants to make a lot of money. He's picturing himself in a nice house, possibly a pool, a 2-car garage, a new car, stuff like that. This is what man strives for on a daily basis. Now, the deceitfulness of wealth, what does it do? It chokes the word. What does choke mean? Drown, strangle completely. And the word that is sowed in him by God becomes unfruitful. The man becomes unfruitful, without fruit, barren. So this is man's dilemma. He's being distracted by this world. So is it possible that you're following in line with this? If you don't know God's will for your life, if you don't hear him, if you haven't surrendered, there's a good chance that you're susceptible to this dilemma. So how do you take care of that? How are you going to take care of that? Now, did you fall in line in that test of being distracted? Now, the world is good for putting people on the path of creating replicas. You know, financially elite say that you got to be successful financially. They give you tips on how to do that. So man is taught that. Man then teaches that to the next generation, and it follows like that. Looking at this objectively, Satan uses mammon to distract people from what is important, which is God, to what is not important, making money. Here is the scenario. Man is born. He is taught to work hard, make money, be successful, be comfortable. Now, in all that, where is God? And that's the point of this video. This is what I wanted to share with you. That there is a possibility that you're being distracted from what God wants. So I believe God wanted me to share this with you. And I believe that it's his way of trying to get you to do what he wants you to do. It might take you going by yourself, asking God, do you hear God's voice? I have videos below that you might want to check out, tips on hearing God's voice. You have to scroll, possibly close to the bottom, but there are tips there that I have given in which you can hear him for yourself. And then, what my practice is I'll write down what I'm hearing. It could be one word that you could hear. It could be 2 words, or it could be a dialogue. Maybe you already hear him. So my suggestion is saying to God, Lord, I surrendered my life to you, but have I surrendered my will? Have I given you my thoughts? Have I taken up my cross, denied myself what I want to do in this world, and follow you? How can I do that, Lord? What do you want me to do? Surrender to him. Say, Lord, I give you my life. I want to follow what you want me to do in this world. I don't want to do what I want anymore. I want to do what you want me to do, like Jesus said. And then hear him. Then ask God to guide you. And then ask God what he wants you to do in this world. What is your will for me, God? So this is what I wanted to share with you. And I pray that the video has blessed you. And if you like it, please like and subscribe. If you know somebody that it would bless, please share it with them, because I believe that the enemy doesn't want this to get out. And the more believers that, hear this, the more that God can break the chains that are surrounding each and every believer. Imagine what we would do if all of us did God's will together. Imagine what could be accomplished. So thank you for taking the time to watch.